Yeah.
Hey everyone, hey gang. How's everyone been doing? This is like almost the last panel. How's everyone feeling? Good, been a good weekend. Chill. This is Rebecca's gonna make fun of me for not remembering the exact name of this because I was getting so tired. Telling queer stories online. Thank you very much. On the panel, we've got Rebecca and Alice, who both make some real good stuff that I'm very into. I guess, would you like to introduce yourselves and specifically the kind of stuff that you're doing online, what that looks like? And then we'll fall into discussion and questions.
Thank you, Alice. Hello, my name is Rebecca Shoptaw, and I make a lot of soft queer stuff on the internet. Started out in a lot of short films, and then I made a web series called Middlemarch, and then I've been making more short films. There may be more web series. Who can say? But yeah, a lot of happy endings, a lot of montages. Just everything is very soft, and everyone's having a nice time, and kind of like an antidote to a lot of what queer narrative so often is. Yes.
Hi, I'm Alice Oseman. I'm mainly an author of young adult fiction, but I also make a webcomic called Heartstopper, which is a queer romance / coming of age story. It's really sweet.
It's great. It's fun. Basically, we're all friends and we all really like each other's stuff. So we're just tell us more about everything that you do. It's so fun. So what we're going to do is just we'll have a chat. We'll do open for questions towards the end. It'll all be a good time. We'll all just have a great time together in this nice, quick session. 50 minutes, it's not quite. So I guess first of all, I want to ask why did you start making the things? Going back from the beginning, what was the impetus? Why specifically did they come about? For free, any order?
I've been into drawing and comics since I was really little. But I got more specifically into webcomics when I was in my teenage years, and I'd been reading them for years and years, and I was also interested in drawing. I've always drawn my characters from my books because I got published before I started a webcomic. So eventually these two interests kind of merged, and I decided I wanted to create my own webcomic. And I knew a lot about webcomics already, what websites people use and how people grow audiences and stuff. And they're one of my favorite things to read, so it's what I ended up doing.
Amazing. Well, I have been making short films since I was an embarrassingly young age, though my early work is not anything I will ever show to anyone. Started out filming weird fictional plays that I would create with my friends in elementary school, and film gradually became a larger and larger part of my identity. But even all through high school, I still was sure that I was straight. So I was mostly just doing ooh, interesting philosophical whatever, and a lot of stylistic things have actually stayed the same, which is interesting. But I started making my first queer short film when I still thought that I was straight. Just I'm going to adapt this David Levithan novel because I just love the prose. It was great. And so that actually was one of the things that helped me figure things out. Mostly it was Buffy. But also I writing a queer character for the first time. I was oh, this feels oddly natural. And that was kind of part of what led me to both identifying the way that I do and also to realizing that once I released that, and then once I did another queer short after that, I was wait a second, this representation has already done so much for me. Creating it and consuming it has made a huge difference for me. So I realized that I could do that for other people as well, and sort of continue on a journey of self-discovery about myself along the way. And so it just I naturally slid into creating more and more queer short films. There's so many. And then Middlemarch was I'd watched Lizzie Bennet Diaries 500 years ago. Middlemarch, by the way, is a vlog-style, gender-bent adaptation of a Victorian novel, basically about a bunch of queer kids in college trying to figure out what they want to do with their lives. And that kind of I knew that the vlog series was a really interesting form, and I had always been interested in character development and hanging out with characters over time. And so I thought that that was the kind of thing that I could actually realistically do and make, and that people would watch, and did it, and it was a great time. Yeah.
Nice. Before we move on, I just want to take a quick audience poll. I'm sorry my voice is weird. The sore throat con flu situation is getting real tough. How many people, by show of hands, I guess, are purely like readers or watchers of online content? So not creators, just like I read the thing, I watch the thing, and that's it. Sweet. And then how many people here are like, I create the thing, and that is a thing I'm doing, or I want to create the thing, I'm working on creating the thing, it's an exciting thing I'm interested in. Sweet. We'll try and do a mix then, because I think we could do this whole panel, it just be about people who want to read and watch the stuff, or we could also talk a little bit about what it takes to do that and those things. We'll mix it up just so everyone's got some good stuff they can go away with. So I guess that like we were kind of talking earlier, and then we were like, let's not talk, save it for the panel, about what the differences you see between the two mediums you use, right? Because it's like all online content, and the big thing we don't have here is podcasts on this panel. That's like another really interesting medium that I think is becoming more and more popular and kind of booming, but's obviously been around for a real long time. So you're looking at like webcomics, and then you're looking at sort of web series and short films. What are the differences? Why did you pick those mediums in particular, other than like your natural talents? You know, is it because you felt like the stories you wanted to tell made sense in those places? Basically, have a chat. Go.
Well, I was saying to you, like, I really like making a webcomic because I have sole control of everything about it. Like, I'm a massive control freak. I like having complete control of everything if I'm working on a project. And even with my novels that are published, I don't have that level of control, because when you publish a novel with a publisher, you've got an editor and all sorts of other people who are involved. But with my webcomic, everything I do, you know, from the writing to the drawing to like the publicity and just everything, that's all me. Whereas, so in my mind, the difference between us is that surely you have lots of other people involved.
So the funny thing about this would be true of almost anyone. However, I too am a bit of a control freak, or rather, the thing with me and Middlemarch and really everything is that like I create a bunch of stuff. I do it all the time, and I have been able to grow really fast because of it. Like I'm able to explore this thing, explore that thing, like learn this technical thing, learn that thing, and so like grow in this way that's really exciting for me, while also like being able to produce stuff that I really like. And so the only way that I've practically been able to do that is that I do all of the jobs, except for acting. But like for Middlemarch, I had like a separate email for it that was like middlemarchseries@gmail.com, and I would say like we or whatever, but like it was all me. I did the lights, I did the camera, I sewed some of the costumes, like I organized everything, I shot everything, I directed everything, like all of the, and it did get to a point where it was like, this is fantastic, I'm learning so much, I'm growing so fast as a filmmaker, and like this is the only way that a project this big, there are like 70 episodes, like could get off of the ground and like actually happen. Especially like there was a point, a few actors dropped out, which has happened with like every student made web series I have ever encountered, and it got to a point where it was like I had to decide whether to continue making the show, and I ultimately did do it, and I'm very glad I did, but like I would not have been able to make that decision if I had had like a crew that I would have to be like, okay, we thought it was going to be one semester, now it's going to be all year, every weekend, cool. So like I did as much as I could to make it like less intense for the actors as much as possible, that they had a great time, and luckily we're happy to come back. But I really like in the past, less because, I mean, I do enjoy having a lot of creative control, but it's often just because it's like that is the way that I know that I can actually make it. But I'm excited going forward to do some more stuff, bringing some more people on set and seeing how that changes things. But yeah, I think it is sort of one thing that's very true, especially of people creating things online. It's not just like, I love doing the jobs, it's like that's the only way the jobs are getting done at this level. Yeah.
So online mediums and platforms and stuff, I think, have become increasingly monetized in various ways. Whereas there's also a lot of people who create stuff where money is in no way involved, and that's very much not something that's happening. Obviously, like Alice, for example, you've got these kind of two worlds of the thing where you're beholden to other people and editors and stuff, but that is like your career. And then you have this thing on the side that, I mean, like you've just done a Kickstarter project, so like that's kind of gone into money. Like, do you guys, have you thought about money in web projects and what that looks like, or is that something that's
For
sort of
me-
like it's such a passion?
It didn't start as like a monetized thing. So when I started posting it online, I posted it on Tumblr, which doesn't have any sort of monetization capacity, and Tapas, which is a specifically comics related website, which does sort of have a monetized thing. They have this like tipping system, but you don't really get much money out of it. So when I started, it was not monetized at all. It was literally just something that I did as like a passion project, basically. But it got to the point where, you know, the comic was doing well, it was increasing in subscribers, and I wanted to spend more time doing it. So I started a Patreon, and in that, I felt like I could justify spending more time on Heartstopper. And that, you know, that the Patreon grew, and that actually is like probably the most regular income that I have at the moment, because when you're an author, it would take me ages to explain the money side of being an author, but basically payments are random and you don't know when they're coming. But Patreon has that's basically like changed my life. It's a regular income that I get. It means I can justify spending, you know, I spend like a few hours a day every day on Heartstopper, and it's, I don't know, I mean, and yet it hasn't taken away from that feeling of it being a passion project. So what about you?
It's interesting. Like I'm still quite young. I just graduated from college, and I'm in an MFA program now, which is wonderful. And I'm sort of like just trying to figure out how to be an adult person most of the time. And so like I still, you know, YouTube is so great, loves giving queer people money. So that never, there was a small period of time when like YouTube remonetizing things overlapped with like one film that I'd made a while ago getting kind of popular, where I made like a tiny bit of money. But it's really never been anything like a source of income for me, but it's also not exactly a passion project either. I mean, it is a project and I'm passionate about it, but it's also like, this is what I would like someone to pay me to do at some point. Not necessarily exactly what I'm doing, but like, this is the industry that I am trying to figure out how to work in. So it's like, it's not just like, ooh, what a fun thing I do, completely unrelated to my career. But I do think that like, money-wise, the thing that's been changing for me recently is that I've been increasingly just very passionate about trying to pay people. I can't so much when it's like a close friend and they feel weird about it, though I'll still insist on buying them dinner. But like I recently, for the first time, had a project where like I brought in people that I didn't know very well, and I was like, please let me pay you. And it was kind of a similar thing where like I just felt more okay spending time. Like when I first started out, I was like, it's okay, we don't need another take, I don't want to take any more of your time, I'll fix it in post. But like now, knowing that I was paying them, even though it was like nothing, it was like, okay, we've committed, we're gonna be here, this is the plan. And then I was like, yes, let us do another take. And it really does kind of free you up in a wonderful way, whether it's like you are making money or you just like know that people are being paid for their work.
I guess it's interesting because a lot of this, the reason why this is interesting to me is because the money, like looking at Patreon and stuff, comes from people who are supporting you, as opposed to coming from the top down and it being something where it's prescriptive. So it's like you can, but this is what you have to include or not include, or how you need to do it. Do you feel like having that creates a freedom in terms of like queer stories in particular, that you're able to tell these things that maybe wouldn't have the backing of like the top down system?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel like webcomics in particular are telling such, like, webcomics is a massively queer space anyway, but webcomics in particular do tell stories that you would never see, even in like books, in the literature world, you would never see stories like this, just telling stories about people who, you know, identify in ways that you just never see representation for anywhere else. And I think that does come down to the fact that webcomics are created usually by one single person who can't really find any other way. There aren't any other areas that they really feel like would they be able to tell that story. So for me, I mean, Heartstopper, I decided to tell as a webcomic because I considered trying to tell it as a novel originally, but then the way that I decided to structure it, it's very episodic. Hasn't got really like an arc like you have in novels. So I decided a webcomic would be much better for it, and it just wouldn't have worked as a novel. I feel like as a novel it would have kind of faded into the background, because I love Heartstopper, but it's quite a generic story in hopefully a good way. But as a webcomic, it just, everything clicked, so.
Yeah, no, and it really, I can't imagine it as a novel, so that's wild. It never, because it's just like such a fantastic webcomic setup, which is a whole other fascinating thing. But yeah, I do think that, like, especially since we were talking about this before, how like with film as opposed to novel writing, you so often need permission from someone, usually higher up, to be able to make it. So you can't just like sit in your house by yourself and make your like queer fantasy film. Like, good luck. I mean, you can, it might not be great. But so there's a lot of like permission, not just to like get your work out there, but even just to like be able to start working, which can be incredibly daunting. And so like, again, with webcomics, with web series is like webcomics, there's a lot of just like totally other worlds levels of representation. And often like you do get the sacrifices of like the writing sometimes fluctuates a lot in quality. A lot of times it's made by like college students, and like, so, you know, the people who have not learned that much about all of the technical stuff, but so often the stories are just like not just so like great as stories, but so completely felt by the people making them. Like they don't feel watered down through various levels of producers who all want different things. It's like, this is this person's vision, and you can feel that, and that's like an amazing thing to get to see in media that I feel like I also really get from webcomics.
Yeah.
Whereas like it feels so different from the like film school idea of like what a short film is. That's just like you trying to convince someone to give you money for a feature. Whereas here it's like, this is the point in and of itself. Though, you know, sometimes the webcomics do get published.
Yeah.
I mean, we were talking earlier, Rebecca, and you were saying that you felt like your stories had a lot more in common than with Alice's work, even though it's different mediums than like a lot of stuff is in the same medium. Can you like speak to that and what that was?
Yeah, I feel like, okay, at some point over this semester, I had a little fun existential crisis, as one does, and was thinking about like different kinds of storytelling, and I sort of identified two that I see a lot in online media, one of which is kind of like the rom-com mode that develops a lot of the time out of fan fiction and has kind of like, you understand how the structure works and you're excited to see like how we're gonna go along this path and like where we're headed and what it's gonna, you know, and then so like for example, a scene like a kiss scene will often, the point of that will be like, they got to the kiss moment and we're really excited they made it there, rather than like, what does it feel like for them to be having that experience, I guess. And then like type 2 is a lot more ambiguous, like you don't really know where it's going. You don't know, like it doesn't follow a structure that is super established, so it's so open and so exciting. And it breaks all of the rules, but also like takes you to somewhere you weren't expecting. And it's like, either you're like, I do not understand what this story is, why am I reading or watching this? Or it just can be like really, really exciting to make and to consume. And that's one thing I've really loved about Alice's work, especially Radio Silence, but also all of it is just like, it doesn't feel like we're moving through a structure. It feels more like all the structure is gone and this is like people living and we're seeing where all of that goes. And that's the kind of writing that I'm increasingly trying to do more of. As much as I do love a good structure, I think it's like especially great for queer representation because so much of like structure itself is so bound up in like very heteronormative ideas. And so like it can be really fun, like while you're dismantling a lot of narrative expectations, to also dismantle the expectations of like how a story should work. That was a long speech. Someone else say something.
I don't know what to add. That's just a really good analysis. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you say about like stories having more of like I'd say like a non-linear structure, because that I definitely see that in webcomics, but I feel like I haven't seen as much of that in web series.
Yeah, and that's sort of, I feel like there are also just so many different kinds of web series even, that it's like within vlog series, it's more like that because you have the super fun medium of the vlog, which some people don't, they're just like, yes, okay, the camera's there, we're set, but a lot of people do a lot of playing with the form, which is great, like awkward silences and like someone is kind of out of frame, like playing with what it is physically like to stage a story through that, and so that leaves a lot of like episodes that are kind of just people existing, like plot is not being advanced, but also that's the point. Like there's a lot of room for playing with like what is narratively necessary and like what you can leave out and what you can include that people wouldn't expect. So there's still a lot of, good experimental stuff going on in literary web series.
I think a big part of a lot of online media is the ability to be like, it's something that you can interact with in a very real and like live way. So vlog series is a really interesting one because you, especially if they're being released, which a lot of them end up being on a sort of like real-time scale, if you are in the comments, you can sometimes get like those replies from characters or like that kind of, or you get these kind of social media accounts for the people who are in those series. And that's something that just isn't possible with a lot of traditional media and just all like doesn't make sense and feels a bit weird and false. Like, can you talk to that idea of like how you interact with readers or with people who are watching, and how you expand that beyond in a way that maybe traditional media couldn't have that flexibility?
For me, like the interaction with readers is one of my favourite things about creating stories online. Just because you get that immediate feedback, like it's just fun to know. I mean, it's the same with my books, my published books. I always want to know what people think of them when they first come out, which can be bad if there are bad reviews. But like with webcomics, you know, when you upload something, there will be comments immediately. And even, especially now with my Patreon, in which I usually upload a page every day, I will get comments every day. And it's exciting. Like, obviously you can get a few bad comments here and there, but I just find it so exciting to witness those reactions immediately. It kind of just fuels my passion for the project.
Yeah.
What about you?
It starts to feel like you're in your own fandom a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, because like you're like, yeah, I love that moment too. And you're like, wait, no, I wrote that moment. Yeah. This is weird. But yeah, no, it's kind of like you get to re-experience the flow of the story with people, which is so amazing. The social media stuff I had a blast with. I didn't think I was going to do much of it because our story wasn't actually in real time. It starts airing 6 months after the story ends, but it ended up being really interesting having all the characters interact like on Twitter with each other and with episodes that had aired, knowing that this had all happened a while ago. And so people would like ask them if they were dating and they would be like, what? I'm gonna go now. But so that was just like a really fun thing for playing with character voice even. Like kind of, I got very good at improvising in character. Like I would just tweet people back and forth, not really, I know a lot of people do script their transmedia, but I was just like seeing what happened. But like people would ask questions on Tumblr and it was just like such a great time to really get to know character voice in a way that like in a 5-minute short, character voice is never gonna be that developed, especially if there's no dialogue. But so it was really getting to spend time with characters in a totally different way, which was wonderful.
Amazing. I wanted to ask, before we go into more of these like deep questions, kind of wanted to talk about, do you have any pieces of media, online media and stuff that you personally are fans of or that you like other than each other's, because we know they're all great, that you think are really interesting in a particular way, or like playing with the form, or like especially ones that involve kind of queer characters, but just in general? Rebecca's like, maybe we can know.
Yes. I have 2 web series that come to mind that are quite different from each other, both of which I like thought that I was not going to like and then really loved, which I feel like always happens with things that I really enjoy. The first is called Words from Wild. Some college students, I think, in Australia made this web series that was like a modern adaptation of the life of Oscar Wilde, which should be terrible, but it was incredibly well researched and actually, and like some genders were changed around, enough details were changed around that it was a new story that felt kind of like that story but could move in a different direction, but still had all of this like really well updated like Wilde witticism and did fantastic things with the vlog form, which was great. And that series like got kind of underappreciated because people were like, what do we do with this? Like it didn't follow a lot of traditional like fandom arcs. and so no one really knew what to do with it. And of course, so I was like, this is the best thing. And then the other one is this other web series that, again, people don't know what to do with. It's called The Feels. I don't know if anyone's seen it. It's got these tiny, tiny episodes, which, again, I didn't really understand why I was going to like it. But it's very much like literally slice of life, like a few minutes, very well produced, but just you're dropping in and out of the life of this one bi guy living in New York who's kind of a mess. And it doesn't follow much of a plot or have much of an overall arc, but each episode is kind of like a little poem. And they're very self-contained and very well thought out. And so altogether, it's like, it feels kind of like reading a collection of poetry that's all about one character, but like a web series, like wild. Anyway, have you now thought of something?
I have. I think I would recommend a webcomic called Rock and Riot. Has anyone read that? Yay.
Yay. So good.
I know.
I'll second that.
It's basically about this big bunch of queer characters living in like the 50s or 60s,
Ambiguous
50s,
50s,
60s. And them being queer is not really a problem, apart from the fact that they can't go to prom, which is sad. But it's just the most cheerful, like happy, and I thought of it when you said like one that plays with form, because a bit like Heartstopper, it's very much an episodic format. It's like each chapter kind of deals with a different character or set of characters in a way that, you know, a novel probably wouldn't, and it's just great. And the other one that I thought of, which is not a webcomic or a web series, is The Bright Sessions, which is a podcast / audio drama, which is about, again, a big bunch of mostly queer characters who, it's all set, it's like, oh, how do I describe it?
It is about like confused, mostly queer superheroes,
yeah, but not really.
But like kind of like people who have superhero powers, but in a like real world story.
Yeah, and it's all set. It's all like recordings from a therapist's office, and she's like a therapist to people who have these powers, and it's just their like recordings of their sessions, and it's so good.
Yeah, that's another one that really, you're like, oh, it's so nice, little dropping in with their sessions, and then like 10 episodes in, you're like, I just care about their welfare so much. Are they okay? Are they eating?
Yeah.
You know, so it becomes something that you get really invested in really quickly without you noticing, which is great.
Before I throw over to a few audience questions or discussion points or ideas and stuff, do you have any questions for each other? Any chance? No pressure.
Oh my god.
That was a lot of pressure.
I was unprepared.
But you know what? We can go to audience and we'll come back to that. We'll come
I
back.
have something good.
Introduce that. Anyone got any questions or like topics that you want to talk about, or like questions about your own content that you want to chat about? Anything like that? Hello.
I don't know if you already discussed this because I came in late, but could you talk a bit about writing scripts and like the process of writing a script for a graphic novel or
Yeah,
That's a good
that's a
question.
good question. So I don't know about you, but my script writing process is very unprofessional. Literally, I just write mine on like Microsoft Word with like the character name, then a dash, and then what they say.
Amazing.
So I don't put it in like any sort of official script format. I don't know how people write comics, like actual published comics. What is the format? I have no idea. What about you?
I do, like, I got whatever free script writing program 500 years ago, so I definitely, like, it looks snazzy, but I do most of the, like, actual thinking through the writing in text edit documents, which is how I live my entire life, is, like, I'll map out everything that needs to happen and in what order and color code everything and write just little lines of dialogue that I like and I don't know where they're supposed to go. And then, like, out of all of that, once I start like actually writing so many lines of dialogue that I'm basically just writing a scene, then I open up my screenwriting program and go like, you know, da-da-da. But I'm trying to change the way that I write a bit now that like I'm not just taking my own scripts and producing them, but like showing them to other people in between. So I try to like write in more of the cinematography, not literally like, here's a close-up, but like the waves softly lapping on the shore, the sky, morning light filtering through the clouds, like getting a little bit more like poetic about it so that people can understand that it would be pretty, basically. Yes.
I kind of want to know, stemming from that, when you're not going back to like the not being beholden to people, how do you know when you're done with the writing? Do you know like the writing editing bit? How do you know when it's ready to go out into the world? Or is it just like, I have confidence in my artistic form, so I just know?
I feel like for me, I mean, there's sort of like a draft process in that I plan, like, Heartstopper is in big long chapters that last quite a long time. So I plan most of the chapter in advance, like the main plot points. And then as I go along, I usually write it maybe a few scenes in advance of when I'm actually drawing it. So I've got all the dialogue and like what I want to happen. And then when it comes to the drawing stage, usually a few things get like switched around, because when you're drawing, you know, it's like sometimes you just can't fit dialogue in, or sometimes something just doesn't feel right and you have to change it. So for me, I feel like once I've got to the point of actual drawing, I've kind of gone over it already like a couple of times. So by that point, I do feel more confident in what I'm making. And like with a webcomic, I mean, you can't kind of just dally around like rewriting and rewriting. It's the sort of thing where you do have to have a bit of confidence in what you are writing. And if you don't, then that's when you start have to take a hiatus for ages, and I don't like doing that.
Yeah, no, it's a very sort of funny thing, and this is part of why I don't write novels, is I always hated revising, even though I love film editing. But like with the scripts that I write, I do like some amount of revision, but most of the time the first draft is what we shoot, because it changes so much on set, and then it changes again when we edit. I'm very much a like, it's fine if you ignore the words that I wrote. Say what feels natural for you. Do what blocking feels natural for you. You know, if anyone's ever struggling with anything, I'm like, it's fine, change it. I'm the writer, I'm not offended, go. And so like the writing changes so much, and in such good and productive ways on set. Like I make room for improv. I mean, on Middlemarch, what we did is like we shot, like I had the script, and so we would shoot it as close to as written as possible, and we would get the whole episode that way. And then I would be like, all right, we've been shooting for a while. This take, do whatever you want. And I pretty much always use the last take, which was often much closer to the script than their earlier attempts. But like people would just spontaneously do these things that worked so well for their characters. It was so exciting. And it's like, I feel like if I had spent a really long time going over every line and be like, ooh, should he say or And then when we do it, he just doesn't say either of them. Like I would just lose my mind. So it's like, I like the sort of fluid, like you write it and then it changes as you're filming, and then you revise again when you edit and put everything together. And there I'm very meticulous of like, I shook the camera slightly, or like, I don't like that pause. But like, that's a kind of editing that I've never liked doing on the page. Like it doesn't feel done until it's shot and edited. And even then, like deadlines, like having like the episode has to be up at 5:30, like it will be up, which is always, I think, a wonderful thing about this kind of thing, where it's like you've told people what your release date is, so it'll be there.
Any questions, more questions, or comments or ideas? Was that a hand? That looks like a hand over in the corner.
I didn't even notice. So when you said earlier on that because when you are writing about queer characters, it feels very natural for you, which is actually the best way to write. I mean, I did some of the way because I have autism and I write about autistic characters all the time, but I also write queer characters as well. In fact, a friend of mine are putting together this script for a television pilot that's all about all these diverse people that doesn't just include queer characters, but also includes a whole bunch of people with all different sexualities and issues. But what I would like to know is like, what advice would you give to someone who's writing a queer character but isn't technically queer themselves?
It's a good question.
That is a good question.
Oh boy. I have like one kind of stock answer to this question that I like, because it's sort of how I think about representing queer identities or other marginalized identities that I don't have, which is partly like research. And also another really helpful thing is have multiple people with that identity or that marginalization, because then there's less pressure on each specific one to represent everything that you think about queer people. But then also like, to not have that be the generating point of the story can be really helpful. This one is less common, but it's like, that's not, like, I am cis. I don't know what it is to be a trans person, so I'm not going to be like, here's my film. It's about what it feels like to be trans. But like, if I'm already writing a film about, like, I don't know, superheroes, maybe it's the Bright Sessions again, but like, if I'm writing a film about superheroes and I'm like, I want to get as many people onto this superhero squad as possible, and I'm like, oh cool, yeah, I want to make that superhero non-binary and find a non-binary actor, like that was not the generating point of their character, so I already have conflict for them that's not about like what their experience of that identity is, because I just, like, it's not my place.
I think I'd agree with all of that. And just as an example, this isn't to do with my webcomic, but for my third novel, I Was Born for This, it has a trans protagonist and a Muslim protagonist, neither of which are things that I am. So although both of their stories were completely unrelated to those identities, obviously that part of their identity is important. And so when I was researching for the novel, I talked to a lot of people who are trans and a lot of people who are Muslim, and, you know, they asked them questions like, you know, what should I be thinking about when writing these characters? So just having that discussion and being open to criticism in particular, like understanding that you probably will get something wrong, and that's okay. It's good that you are learning. You know,
you're not a horrible person.
Yeah.
It's like, we've all been taught a lot of very incorrect things about, like, literally everyone. So it's...
Yeah, so just making the time to talk to people and do the research, and it'll be fine.
I would add, like, talking to people, but if you can't necessarily find the people who are willing to do the talking, because it's a lot of like, can you help me talk about the things in your life? Looking at like non-fiction written by those people about their lives and doing research that way can also be a really useful way of grounding. And then you can always, in terms of getting input from someone, pay people after it's done or when it's in a draft process to do sensitivity reading, or there's like another term for it now that people are using, which is like meant to be a better term, which I've totally forgotten. It's some kind of beta reader. It's a different kind of like which is like a, I am not going to like ask you for your time for free if we're not just like friends and you're interested and willing to do it, but afterwards I can pay you a bit of money to do it once I've done a ton of research on my own and like done that independently, so I'm not sort of like putting it all on you to do, if that makes sense. Cool. Does anyone else in the room have any ideas about that? Because I feel like we're all in this space and like so many of us are makers, so it feels like we aren't the only people. Feel free to say. No. It's fine. You can also be quiet. Do you guys have questions for each other? I've just remembered that we said we didn't do that. I'm so prepared.
Rowan, do I get candy now?
Yes, you get.
Good.
Afterwards, I'll pay you.
Thank you. I was wondering whether working in the webcomic mode for so long at this point has shifted the way that you think about writing novels.
You know what? Yeah, I feel like sitting down to write, because I'm working on my 4th book at the moment, and it is a different experience not having the immediate feedback that you get with a webcomic, and it's just a completely different experience, because when you're writing a webcomic and posting it online, it almost feels like a sort of collaborative thing. Although it's something that I've created, it's something that I'm constantly sharing with everyone, whereas my novels, I do not like sharing them with anyone until they're like perfect and published. So yeah, it's a very different experience, and it's weird. It's weird. They're very different things, but somehow both of them are happening. I don't know. I couldn't think of a question. Oh no.
I'm so hurt.
Wow. Just hide your head in shame, Alice. That's fine. Anyone else in the audience got anything they wanted to ask, to say? No, there's like no pressure. I like to leave a bit of a gap in case someone's like being super shy about it and didn't want to say. Sweet.
Oh, I have a question.
Oh.
Okay.
Go.
How the tables have tabled.
What do you see your like online creations evolving into? Do you see yourself like continuing to create content just for online, or do you think you would eventually like branch out?
Okay, well, this is the other thing about graduating from college. You spend a lot of time sitting in your home thinking about these things. And at the moment, like, it's shifted a lot. But at the moment, my like dream idea for far in the future is to have like a relatively steady job popping around doing some kind of crew or ideally directing stuff for TV. Like just going from show to show, having a great time, not being like, I'm going to take my film from production all the way through release and all of that. Like, but then on the side when I can, when I have time, continuing to do my own stuff. And so like, ideally, at some point, someone would be like, hey, I like those things that you're doing. Would you like to do that on a large scale? And I would be like, why, yes, I would. Thank you. But like, I also just find directing itself very fulfilling, and I don't want to let my work like morph to try to become the kind of thing that is sellable. And like, even like, especially being in an MFA program now, I'm realizing like what kinds of things get sold and get made and get pitched. And I'm like, oh no, but it's like, I don't want to compromise any of that. So I'm just like, I just want to keep exploring things, having a good gay time on YouTube, as long as YouTube exists. But then also like separately doing film industry stuff and hoping that one day they will come together.
Do you
That's
have
my
any
life plan.
Do you have any advice for people who might be wanting to do the same kind of like content as you online? Whether that's like motivational advice or like practical, like, oh, by the way, remember not to do this.
For me, my biggest advice for writing a webcomic is to really understand your limits and what you can physically create in an amount of time. Because so many webcomics they just end up uncompleted, they never get finished, or they have to go on hiatus after hiatus because the creator is struggling so much to keep up with the workload. So the first thing that I thought about when I sat down to like plan Heartstopper was, you know, what is a style that I can draw this in that is relatively quick and doesn't bore me or make me annoyed? Because like, for me, one thing I hate in art is colouring. Just not good at it. So my webcomic is in black and white, and the shading is pretty simple, and every page takes me like hour and a half, 2 hours to make. And so that's manageable. Like I could plan, okay, so I'll have to spend this many hours on it per week or this many hours per month. And it was manageable. But a lot of people create these really, really beautiful webcomics that are full colour, like absolutely amazing to look at, but they rarely update because obviously each page must take like days to create. And I mean, if that's something you want to do, fair enough. But if you are more interested, like me, in creating a story that updates fairly regularly, people can follow along with it. It doesn't like stop going at any point. Just know your limits, understand what you can create, and like time management is the key. It's amazing how like applicable that advice is to like all film things. Please like copy paste. I do think also like just coming out of that, just knowing your priorities is hugely helpful, because especially on a film set, like things will be sacrificed, something will change, something will not be what you thought it was going to be, and knowing like what is absolutely essential, like what the heart of your story is and what can change, prevents you from like facing one problem on set and being like, it's over, we're done. And then the other thing is like a lot of the reason that people don't do like web series or short films, a lot of why they just like stop before they do it is that they either think that like they don't have enough experience or enough knowledge to do it, or that they don't have enough money to do it. And they're kind of related animals, but like in both cases, a lot of things are free that you wouldn't think would be free. Like where you put your lamp, if you've got like a standing lamp in the room and that's all you have to light, you can put it in a much better place. Like you can spend a lot of time, like it's like everything that you don't have with money, you can do with time. Like I just did a film that had like special effects in it. There's like, it was cute, it was Halloween-y, there's like a sort of ghost sprite thing, and it's very gay, but like that's the kind of thing that normally would cost a lot of money, but I just shot it like on my DSLR,
in Central Park with a couple actors, and like I was able to do that because I spent forever planning and like making sure that they didn't overlap and understanding all of the settings that I wanted to use and how I would edit it together. And it's like you can, and even like character-wise, acting-wise, like directing your actors and like spending time talking through what your characters are going through with your actors does not cost you money. Especially if you do it like outside of the film set. Like if you just like have a coffee, you know, have a chat about like, and that can absolutely transform, you know, not shooting in front of a white wall. Like there are so many things that you can do researching, learning that aren't like, oh, you have to buy the fancy equipment, but just like you can spend time preparing, learning, teaching yourself whatever you think it is that you need to know without overwhelming yourself. And then just like, but don't not do it because you don't think that you're prepared to do it, because if you think that, you're never going to be like, and now I'm prepared. It's just like if you want to do it enough, I'm doing what every person at VidCon does, but like it is really helpful to just make one thing, because then it's not like this is the work that will define who I am. Like I made so much bad stuff in middle school, which is honestly why I'm able to do stuff that I'm really proud of now, because it's like we got that out of the system.
I think it's very, like, this is, my background's in theatre, and I think when you're doing theatre improvisation when you're younger and devising and stuff in school, because they don't give enough limits, it's like everything you do has to be amazing, and it has to be like a 10-minute long play. And we always did this rule. I ended up working with this director who was incredible, and he was like, we're going to do 20 minutes of devising, and it has to be 30 seconds. And suddenly you're like, oh shit, damn, like this is exactly what I needed, because it has to be so short. It's not going to be the most incredible, beautiful, profound thing in the world, but you can have a nugget of truth and a nugget of something beautiful. And I think that like speaks to that, the idea of like, if you just make a small thing, make a little thing, don't make it to put it anywhere. Because I think the whole online thing is, you have a hobby and you have to share the hobby, right? Yeah. It's like you can no longer just like do a watercolor. It's like you do a watercolor, but then you put it on your Instagram, and then other people like it, and that's how. And when that's the culture, it's like you have to be good at it, because it's only worth something if people like it, as opposed to being worth something because you practiced and you had to go and you like it. Yeah. It's also so wild to me. I'm like still stuck on the fact that you're talking about the fact the Heartstopper's in black and white, because one of my like I genuinely remember it in color. Yeah. So there's like one of my favorite panels is the panel, spoiler alert, Before a Kiss.
So good.
Where it's from one of the characters' point of view looking at the other one, and there's flowers. It's like with Nick with the flowers behind him, and I've always remembered that in color, because in my head I'm like, yeah, the flowers, obviously. And now I'm looking back, I'm like, it was in black and white this whole time. Oh my God.
About how beautiful Heartstopper is. Like I have a folder on my computer that is screenshots of Heartstopper panels to use as cinematography inspiration. So, you know.
That's amazing.
Can we also talk about the fact that Rebecca really was like, oh yeah, like a lot of short films. Her last project was 26 micro shorts. Just real casual, like, oh, by the way, guys, I'm just releasing 26 films. And you're like, sure, I guess. That's you're someone who's achieving everything. I was also kind of thinking about this whole online creation thing, and the fact that a big part of online creation that a lot of people here are probably really familiar with is the idea of like fan art and fan fiction and stuff. And I was like, oh, I don't know whether these guys have any relationship with it, and I don't want to ask it in case they're both like, nope, no one does it about my stuff. I've never done it about anyone else. And then I remembered on your Instagram, you're literally doing one. You're doing an AU of Heartstopper anyway. So I was like, I guess like talk about whatever relationship you have to these other sort of like traditional online like queer fan stuff.
Yeah, I love it. Like fan fiction and fan art, is seeing that for something that I've made is like the best feeling in the world. I mean, obviously there wasn't that much to start, but like particularly recently there's just been more and more, particularly fan art, and it's just, I mean, it's the best feeling when you see that, because someone has actually spent time creating something because they enjoyed what you created so much.
So beautiful. We actually met because I commissioned you to do fan art for my web series, because I was like, someone wanted to give me a gift, and I was like, well, you know, I know this artist whose art I really like, you could commission them. And I was like, yeah, just watch these episodes for reference, and then you clearly watched all of the other ones also. And now here we are. But yeah, no, it really is like a beautiful thing. It's weird because a lot of like web series writers came out of fandom creation, and I really wasn't. I was just like sitting in my home writing stuff and like reading books and whatever, but I also like really appreciate like the ways that it makes people read your work and think about your work and like reinterpret it. Like whenever I saw fan art, I fully died, and also I drew you really terrible fan art. Oh no, I loved it. For his birthday, it's fine.
I loved it.
But yeah, I don't know. It's like it's often the way that I would turn to show appreciation for things, even though I'm not actually an artist. But it's just like, yeah, I'll scribble the thing because it's good. And so whenever anyone does that, especially when they do like a beautiful job of it, I'm just like, thank you. Huh? Yeah.
And your Middlemarch isn't fan anything,
God,
but like
yeah.
also
no,
it's
but
sort
also
of
it is fan fiction. Yeah, that's the weird thing. It's like very, very well. It's like a very well produced modern AU, which is what so much adaptation is. Which is really fascinating because like I do this a lot with like almost everything that I do is an adaptation of some sort, like either like an adaptation of an experience my friend had or like an adaptation of an experience I had every once in a while, where it's like not about me, it's just like what a fun story that is. But often it's like I'll come from poems. I've sort of been working my way through the queer canon. We just shot a like short film adapted from Sappho poems, which is going to be great. And like I do think that often like when I am very moved by something, I do turn, like that's how I get myself into a film. But it's often just like different kinds of mediums, and like I can't write George Eliot a fan letter because she's been dead for a really long time. But
so I guess I'll make her a web series.
Yeah, but it's also like it's a really fun act of interpretation, which is something else I've always loved to do, is like you really get to know something and think through something, and you're working with a source text that you get to play with in all these fun ways, and it's exciting in a different way, and it feels bigger than itself in a way that I really love. Plus, I just always go up to Middlemarch and bookstores, and I'm like, hello, my love.
We're like almost at the end of time, but I just wanted to make sure there wasn't anyone who wanted to ask anything or make a comment or say anything. Oh, hello, yes.
Hi, I guess, I'm not sure if that applies to you, but I'm just gonna ask, do you ever get bored with any of your projects? If you ever do something and feel like, or how do you make sure you commit to the right thing? If you have a lot of ideas?
I feel, you know what? I feel you on that one. Please tell me as well.
I feel like I'm not the best person to ask this because I feel like I don't have like a billion ideas at once. I am very much a person who has one big idea and then I just fixate on it for like years. And yeah, not getting bored. For me, that comes all back down to the planning process and making sure that every like scene that I've got coming up, I'm thinking particularly of my webcomic, but this also applies to my novels, to be honest. Every scene that I've got coming up is something that I am quite excited to write. So, you know, if I'm entering a scene and I'm like, this is boring, I don't, like, nothing's happening, then make something happen. Like, you know, if you're bored by something you're writing, that's probably because what you're working on is not really stimulating you or exciting you in any way. So you need to, I mean, if you're not a planner, I don't really know what you do, but I'm a planner.
Yes.
So you've got to like go back to the drawing board and look at, you know, what you are trying to create and make it more exciting for yourself and make it something that you are really excited to work on.
Yeah, I think absolutely agree with all of that. I'm also a planner, so you know. But I do think that when you're trying to decide between 500 ideas, one thing that can be very helpful is to know that like if you don't do something now, it can return at some point or come back in a different form. Like there's a film that I made in high school that I didn't like at the time. Like it wasn't working for me at all. And that idea, like it was a ghost movie and I basically just finally made it like years later. Like a lot of times ideas, you were not ready for them yet or they aren't quite there yet. And then after, actually the Sappho one that we just shot, I came up with like 2 years ago. And it would just like sat in a notebook and I was like, maybe I could do this. And now it like over time I've changed, I've grown, and now I've brought different things I was thinking about doing together and it's like, okay, here's the film. But like, you don't have to feel like you're betraying any one idea if you decide not to do it, which I think is often like, oh, but they're all so good. It's like, that's great. Which one do you want to do? Yes, I don't remember the other part of that question, but
amazing. Well,
right.
I guess did that answer the burning question in your heart? Perfect. I think we'll come to the end of the panel in that case. Thank you very much for all of that, and thank you for the questions people asked. Round of applause, I guess, and have a lovely. I think it's like one more session time left, so have a lovely time if you're going there or going back home in the darkness that we're about to go into right now.